Days to go. The countdown is creeping little by little. And Liverpool may be in the market for a winger. Could we see Juventus' Federico Chiesa be heading to the Premier League? Plus, we have developments involving Manuel Ugarte and his move to Manchester United. There's so much to discuss today. We'll look at players that could move before the deadline. Plus, we'll hear from Kieran McKenna live. And there's Eddie Howe, who may have an update on their pursuit of Mark Gailey. And if you're out and about, you can keep up to date with all of the latest transfer news with our dedicated Transfer Centre blog. All you have to do is scan the QR code on your screen right now. A very good morning to you at home. Yes, perhaps not the reunion you were hoping for, or is it? Or is it? Morning to Kwaku Afari, Daniel Khan and Dave Reed. We are expecting an update on Manuel Ugarte's move to Manchester United shortly. They have a full agreement with PSG for the transfer of the midfielder. The deal is worth €60 million. We've been talking about this, haven't we? Manchester United always after a midfielder. It looks like they have finally got their man, Manuel Ugarte, to Manchester United. Probably means that Scott McTominay, been linked with Napoli, is on his way out. Dan, it makes sense to come to you first. Looks like Manchester United finally have their man.
Yeah, absolutely. And this deal has been talked about over the last few weeks. We know Manchester United have been looking for that number 6 in this window. But before any incomings, we have really understood this window for Manchester United, that for any arrivals, they've needed players to leave the club. Now, over the last few days, we've seen the likes of Hannibal being very closely linked to Burnley. It looks like that deal is on its way, or expected to be on its way. And it sounds like Scott McTominay as well could very well be on his way out of Old Trafford to Napoli. So feels like Ugarte, when you looked at the Brighton game and Fulham, actually, the first 2 games of the season for United, a few of those issues from last season still look to be there in terms of being countered through the middle. Casemiro still being a bit isolated. So it looks like this deal could really remedy that, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to recap then, Manchester United have a full agreement with PSG for the signing of midfielder Manuel Ugarte. As I said, the deal worth €60 million, including performance-related add-ons. Ugarte is expected in the UK today to have a medical and sign off on those personal terms. PSG went into negotiations wanting the €60 million they paid Sporting Lisbon for last summer before bonuses. The clubs have compromised, giving the willingness from all parties to get a deal done. So Manuel Ugarte to Manchester United. Kwaku, when you looked at the options that Manchester United had in midfield, we've spoken about Casemiro, Scott McTominay probably leaving. This feels like the right move at the right time for, like we say, all parties.
Yeah, so Manchester United have got a very diverse midfield when it comes to personnel. We know that they were after Sander Berge earlier in the window, missed out on him. And Kobe Mainoo and Bruno Fernandes bring specific skill set along with Mason Mount. But Manuel Ugarte, he covers ground, he's a tough tackler, and he can provide the anchor in midfield that Manchester United have been looking for a long, long time. Casemiro is supposed to be that. In his first season, he was very good at the football club, but physically he's declining. And we're lucky enough to talk to Tim Vickery over the last couple of weeks. He's compared Ugarte to Javier Mascherano, which you can see the comparisons, especially in terms of the way that he's tenacious in the tackle and the way that he covers spaces. And he can also play as well in terms of progressive passes. And so the move makes sense for Manchester United. They finally got this deal over the line. And I've talked about it over the last couple of weeks, but they need that physicality, and Manuel Ugarte definitely brings that to them.
I think he compares as well stylistically to N'Golo Kante as well. Now, obviously, you're not saying he's going to be that guy, because he's very difficult to replicate that guy. But he is someone who will cover a lot of ground. He'll put in a lot of tackles. He will try and drive with the ball and win some fouls. But I don't think United fans should be, excited for him to be delivering goals and assists, because that's not his game. He is there to screen the back four, essentially, and to make sure that he fills the holes that United need filling. And I think the game against Brighton, I didn't think it was that far away for United from winning the game. Now, I'm not saying that means they're that far away from getting in the top 4, because I still think there's a distance to go. But, I liked Manchester United's business last summer, and they didn't fulfil what I was expecting. And I like Manchester United's business this summer. Are they going to fulfil what we're expecting? What are we going to see on the pitch? Because when I'm watching Manchester United, I'm still not entirely sure what I'm going to see week by week. We know Eric Ten Hag wants them to be the best transition side in the world. Ugarte will help them break up play and launch those attacks.
Yeah, and it's also a Man United side that have been porous in midfield over the last couple of seasons, and we saw that in the first game against Fulham. They were getting caught in transition, and not so much against Brighton. That was a different type of football match, but he will plug that gap, and he's a great complementary piece, and that's what I think he is. I don't think he's going to set the world alight at Manchester United. He's a player that he knows his role, and he does his role well. He did it at PSG, and he did it before playing in Portugal, but I don't think he's a player that is necessarily going to get you goals or get you those highlights, but he's going to complement Kobbie Mainoo and Bruno Fernandes nicely in that midfield. I think it's a really good sign. It fits in line with what Manchester United have been doing over the last year or so.
I think he was in the team of the tournament, wasn't he, for the Copa America this summer? So, you know, he's obviously coming into Manchester United in good shape, I suspect, this summer. I'm just wondering whether United fans would have wanted someone who can maybe do both roles alongside Kobbie Mainoo. You know, it feels like we put a lot of pressure on Mainoo to be the main man at United, and you forget how young he is, and he's still got a lot of development and potentially some mistakes to make as a player as well. And you know, if and when that does happen, you know, United fans shouldn't, and wider viewers shouldn't be piling in on Kobbie Mainoo, because he's such a talent. And United think and know that he's going to reach such a high level. I just wonder whether, and we spoke about it with Kevin Hatchard recently as well, whether someone like a Leon Goretzka would have made someone, maybe more sense as someone who can play as the deepest midfielder, but also can do a bit of what Kobbie Mainoo does as well, if he needs to come out of the team, or if he needs a bit of pressure taken off him. But having said that, I do like Ugarte. I think he does what United need and require in that midfield.
I just wonder as well, I mean, we're talking about Ugarte, and we have for a lot of the window as a potential replacement for Casemiro, but I actually think that it gives Eric Ten Hag a lot more flexibility in midfield, and I think actually there are probably some games, perhaps against likes of Manchester City, Liverpool, where if they're more set up on the counter-attack, that actually he'd be a really good partner next to Casemiro, I think. And I think the Brighton game, as you mentioned, was different to Fulham. You know, their pressing was actually pretty good. But I think after that first line goes, you need that midfielder to, if your first line of press is beaten, your midfield has to win the ball. And I think that's where they may be lacking. I think Kobbie Mainoo, as you mentioned, has had such an amazing 12 months. But I think an area he still needs to improve is how he covers the ground and where he spends his energy. So I still think, even though we're talking a lot about Casemiro, Kobbie Mainoo is also not quite there yet. So Ugarte maybe fills both gaps.
Yeah, Kobbie Mainoo's definitely going to benefit from that. You don't want a player that young to get burnt out. It's so easy when you play so many games. Obviously, Manchester United in the Europa League as well this season. David, it's taken quite a while to get this transfer done. Why do you think that's been?
Well, I think, for one, I think you have to say PSG wanted, as you mentioned, to recoup most of, if not all of the money that they spent on the player. And I think it feels like United, under the new minority investment of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, are a little bit harder negotiators. I think they want to spend money, but I think they want to spend it in the right way and at the right amount. So I think they've taken a little bit of time to get there. I know some of the criticism of the previous regime was they just took too long. But I think from United's perspective, they needed to move players on. That was another key to this transfer happening. It looks like Scott McTominay is going to be going to Napoli in Serie A, so it means that they've now been able to push the button on Ugarte and get that done. So I think, you know, it has taken time, but I think it's been sensible.
Absolutely. Right, just to recap then, that's Manchester United have a full agreement with PSG for the signing of midfielder Manuel Ugarte, around 60 million euros, and he's expected in the UK today to have a medical. Right, that's Manchester United. What about one of their biggest rivals, Liverpool, of course, yet to sign a player in this window. However, they have made inquiries about Federico Chiesa, but are yet to actively pursue a deal for the Juventus winger. OK, Dave, where do we stand with this? It came about yesterday. I think it was quite a surprise. Where do we stand with this transfer?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's so much terminology when it comes to transfers, and I think it's just worth just explaining a little bit about how these things kind of work. So often when a club has kind of done a little bit of scouting, been and watched the player, looked at his data and said, he might fit us, they will often then speak to the club, the selling club, potentially selling club, and say, what sort of deal can we put together for this? Is he someone that you're willing to do business for? That's not necessarily meaning that they've made an offer. That's not necessarily saying that there's total full interest and we want to sign this player. It's a kind of putting the feelers out. What might this deal be? And I think that's the stage we're at the moment. Liverpool have made contact and said, look, what sort of conditions can we get this deal done for if we decide to pursue it? It's not a given that Liverpool will decide to pursue that. And obviously, Chiesa isn't the only player that Liverpool are looking at. We know they tried to sign Anthony Gordon earlier in the transfer window. So it's obviously a wide forward that Liverpool have been looking at in this window. And I think, Liverpool have shown in the past they're ready to strike if there's a player there that they think can really add quality. We know they tried for Zubimendi, and it was a kind of Zubimendi or bust situation for Liverpool. We either want that player or it's going to be nobody at all, which it seems is going to be the case heading towards Friday. In Chiesa's scenario, Barcelona are also interested in the player, but who knows what's going on at Barcelona. Chiesa was left out of Juve's pre-season games as well. So it seems like his time in Turin's coming towards an end, and Liverpool is one of the players that they're looking at.
Quaku, obviously, Dave mentioned there, it looks like a wide forward is where they're looking, but it does feel like Liverpool have got a luxury of options in that attack. Is it almost, are they looking in the wrong positions? Because everyone's been talking about them potentially needing a 6 and that position being the most important.
Yeah, it's got an embarrassment of riches out wide, and we're very envious as somebody follows Chelsea in terms of their options out wide. Luis Diaz, Mo Salah, Cody Gakpo, Diogo Jota, Darwin Núñez could all play in that position. Young Ben Doak as well is a very good player. But for Liverpool, it seems like if they can find a move in the transfer window that represents value, then they'll strike with it. And it depends on the conditions of the deal for Chiesa. He's a far cry from the player that we saw a few years ago at the Euros, where he really lit it up and helped Italy win that competition. But if Liverpool and Arne Slot and people, the hierarchy at Anfield, think that he's a player that can come in and have an effect and potentially help Liverpool push for major trophies this season, then they'll try and make that deal happen. He's a player that has suffered a lot for various reasons over the last couple of years. But I do think that if he finds a home, especially because he's got that base level physicality, he can suit the Premier League. He's a player that has got incredible qualities going forward. It's just about finding that consistent form and that consistent run of games as well. But in terms of Liverpool's options in that position, he's going to be struggling for minutes because they've got so many good players. We saw it on the weekend, how good Luis Diaz is, and I think he's going to have a really big season for Liverpool this year. Mo Salah is still Mo Salah. And so if Chiesa does come to Liverpool, there's no guarantee that he starts and gets guaranteed minutes, but it just adds to the embarrassment of riches that they've already got.
Dan, is there an element of risk in this transfer?
That's really much the question, isn't it? Is it a risk or not? And Quaker, you mentioned with Liverpool, is it a bit of a risk or not? I mean, their new sporting director, Richard Hughes, said in pre-season they're going to be opportunistic this summer. If signings do present themselves, they'll definitely have a look at them. And Chiesa potentially is one of those players. When you look at what he's done over the last 3 seasons, I mean, actually, let's start at the bottom, because 2021, 2022, his games played was only 14, but that was because of a serious ACL injury, and we'll come to that in a second. But then last season, really, 33 games played, 9 goals, 3 assists. Really, he was back on form after having a bit of an injury-ridden few years. And you mentioned also him playing on the left wing. Actually, when you look at last season, he was playing as a second striker for the majority of that, playing behind Dusan Vlahovic. And I think the pros of Chiesa is he's extremely two-footed. He can finish outside of the box as well. And as I mentioned, he's very versatile. He can play across the front three, but also behind the striker. We mentioned that injury, though. When you look at how many games he has missed over the last few seasons, it is significant. And you even look at last season or the season before, he had a variety of different injuries, whether that was in his knee, muscular injuries, and it did take him a while to recover from that ACL, understandably, as well. So is it a risk? I mean, Dave mentioned he has a year left on his contract, so perhaps that means the fee wouldn't be as significant. So perhaps maybe it is a risk, but for that fee, maybe it's a risk worth taking. I mean, what do you all think?
I would say, yeah, and also a bit like how PSG wanted that money for Manuel Ugarte, this is a big fee that Juventus paid for him 4 years ago, isn't it, Kwaku? And it actually looks like completely opposite to what PSG have done. They're actually willing to take a pretty big hit on on how much they sell him for.
Huge investment from Juventus. The first 2 years was a loan with an obligation to buy. And like you mentioned, Juventus are a side that, like a lot of the European teams, the top European teams, they're struggling financially. They're banned from European competitions last year because they fell foul of FFP. And they've got rid of a lot of high earners this year. If you think about Rabiot's left, Szczesny's left, and potentially Chiesa's going out the door and it's going to be difficult for them to recoup the fee they got for him. But there's huge reasons for Juventus trying to sell him. The injuries, like you mentioned, Dan, Thiago Motta's come in. He doesn't necessarily fit his progressive 4-2-3-1 system. The financial restrictions, and also his contract's got a year left in it. And so all roads lead to Chiesa leaving Juventus. And it's a shame because I remember how good he was 3 or 4 years ago. He was a player that you thought he was going to become one of the best players in the world, still in his mid-20s. So if he finds a home, then there's no doubt that he can return to the player that he once was. But these injuries have been a big issue, and that's something that Liverpool have to assess in terms of bringing him through the door.
Yes, well, will Federico Chiesa be heading to Liverpool? One player who is goalkeeper Georgi Marmadashvili is having a medical with Liverpool but will return to Valencia on loan once his transfer is finalised. Right, a reminder then of the big transfer news this hour. Manchester United have agreed a deal with PSG to sign Manuel Ugarte. Next, we'll have the latest on Joao Cancelo, who looks set to leave Manchester City. PSG for Manuel Ugarte. It's a deal worth around €60 million. Ugarte was the primary midfield target throughout the window. United are understood to be happy with the price, and there is further news to bring you as well, and that is Scott McTominay is close to finalising his exit terms ahead of a move to Napoli. Once that is done, he will fly over there for a medical. Right, from Manchester United to Manchester City then, as Al Hilal have agreed a deal to sign João Cancelo. The fee is around £21.2 million. Meanwhile, Manchester City are also aware of interest from Atletico Madrid in Mateus Nunes. There's been no contact from the club yet, though. Atletico are understood to be seeking a loan deal. Kwaku, let's just start with João Cancelo then. I mean, this is a player that has arguably one of the best CVs we've ever seen, doesn't he?
An incredible CV. And it's crazy to think that 2 years ago he was in the Premier League team of the season, 2021 season, 21-22 season, and then there was a fallout at Man City and he was surplus to requirements. But yeah, when you talk about CVs and what a player's won, it's second to none in terms of the years that he won, the concentrated years in which he won all of those trophies. And he's gone on loan to various places, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, and still been a very, very good player. And if Barcelona were in a stronger financial position, they might have signed him on a permanent deal. He's only 30 years old as well, João Cancelo. So, yeah, a little bit surprised he hasn't got any takers in mainland Europe, but there's an opportunity to go and make a lot of money out of Saudi Arabia for Al Hilal, so you're not surprised he's taking this option. But I remember a couple of years ago when he was playing one of the first inverted fullbacks that we saw. He was absolutely incredible. A player that can do so much of the ball, was so integral to that Man City side that won 3 league titles in a row. And yes, at the age of 30, I'm surprised to see him leave Europe, but I can completely understand it.
I mean, it wasn't even that long ago, Dan, that he was arguably the best fullback, or at least one of the best fullbacks in the world. Like you say, he's had a couple of loans since. But is he the same player now?
Yeah, I mean, also, you talk about his time in Manchester City. He wasn't just impressive at right-back. He used to debutise a left-back as well, really successfully. I mean, I think he very much is a similar fullback to what we saw in those prime years. But, you know, as you mentioned, at this point of his career, you know, he's achieved a lot. You look at, for Portugal as well, winning that Euros as well with like Cristiano Ronaldo, etc., and everyone else. You know, he has accomplished everything. We were talking earlier about players who have accomplished so much in their CV. They just should go and enjoy themselves at this part of their career. And perhaps, you know, Saudi Arabia, we know the financial advantages of going there. So he might be just thinking, this is my last big payday. Why not?
Yeah, I think that's probably what's hampered any move to any other European club, really. The financials involved with his salary at Manchester City. I remember in one of those seasons at City, he was an absolute lock-in for FPL, wasn't he? I think it was 7 assists.
He was in my team.
Yeah, 7 assists in 21-22. He was almost playing as an attacking midfielder from the full-back position. So, yeah, he was a great player under Pep Guardiola. But, you know, as much as the inverted full-back was kind of vogue then, and kind of still is to a point now, we've seen defence develop into this kind of 4 centre-backs, Tony Pulis throwback, as many big guys as possible in the back 4. So maybe João Cancelo, the game has almost moved beyond him a little bit at the top end of the Premier League. What
he's also fell foul of is the fact that we've seen contracts contract in the last couple of years in terms of players aren't being paid £250,000, £300,000 per week. And so as a result of that, we've seen a lot of players, whether it's with Cancelo or with Jadon Sancho, players that are on big contracts but struggling, Jadon, to find homes because there aren't many clubs in Europe that can pay those wages. And Saudi Arabia are not as active as they were last transfer window. So it's difficult for a lot of these players, but it's good for Cancelo that he's found or potentially found a home in Saudi Arabia, because he's a player for a good couple of years, was lighting up the Premier League, not only as a left-back but as a right-back and a centre midfielder. So, yeah, good move for him.
Dave mentioned, obviously, the fact that his wages will probably be a concern. Do you think the fact that now he is 30, you know, he was that classic, oh, you're over the age of 30, can't do it anymore, but would that come into thinking of, say, Premier League clubs, that you get into a fullback that's the wrong side of 30 and then that could be an issue?
Well, I think when you look at the top 6 clubs at the moment in the Premier League, they're probably all well stocked in those positions, aren't they? And as you mentioned as well, Dave, you know, you look at Arsenal, Manchester City especially, they all have big defenders at fullback. And I think maybe the one minor about Cancelo at Manchester City, which is maybe why Guardiola went away from, you know, the conventional fullback, is he didn't want to be beaten one-on-one anymore. And I think Cancelo occasionally would get beat on the counter, and that was something Guardiola had to shore up. So I think it's more when you just look at the Premier League now, especially the top 6, they're just slightly moving away from that, looking at bigger, more physical centre-backs who play in that position that don't get beat one-on-one.
Do you think, Dave, that with this move, obviously it does feel like it might be the only option for him? I know you say maybe it's a chance to go and get like a last payday he is, but at 30, you're not actually that old. Do you think he'll be a little disappointed that perhaps other clubs aren't in for him and that looks like to be his only option?
I mean, maybe, but I mean, I've not won what he's won, so it's hard to kind of put myself in his shoes and what your motivation is when you get to 30 and you've kind of played for some of the biggest clubs in the world. So do you have that motivation to continue playing at the top level? You know, there's obviously a discrepancy in the level of the football in Saudi Arabia and also on occasion around different standards of training facilities in Saudi Arabia. So he's obviously going to a place that is a developing football nation. So, you know, it seems that he wants to be a part of that and maybe that's going to be part of his motivation.
Yeah, it looks like Joao Cancelo will be off to Saudi Arabia. Right, next we'll hear from Ipswich boss Kieran McKenna live, and we'll also bring you Eddie Howe's press conference a little bit later this morning too. Welcome back. We are hoping to hear from Ipswich manager Kieran McKenna live on Good Morning Transfers. But first of all, Quakey, what have you made just in general of Ipswich's transfer business? It's notoriously difficult for promoted clubs to compete in the Premier League, especially in the transfer window. So what have you made of it? They have been very proactive.
They have been very proactive. And I think one of the biggest concerns was the lack of Premier League experience in this Ipswich side in comparison to the rest of the teams in the Premier League. But I think that they've generally done good business and hopefully do more business before now and the end of the window.
Yeah, well, we can hear from Kieran McKenna. He's here right now.
Perfect. Send them our way as well if you can. Look, let's go back to Saturday. You said, look, ultimately we want to get points, but if we don't and we walk away with the weekend feeling stronger, is that how you feel you are after that?
I think in some ways, yes. Of course, it was a difficult game as we thought it would be. There was positives in there for us in the goal we scored and a couple of the passages that we had. I think probably the biggest positive that we've took from the game was that in a really difficult scenario at 3-1, we've conceded 3 goals in 5 minutes against, the strongest team with their crowd absolutely up. It would have been very easy to cave in that scenario, and we've seen that with different teams over the years there, and the game can run pretty wild really quickly. So we would like to have got hold of it after the first or second goal, but I think the positive was at 3-1 in the really difficult situation that we were in. The group stayed together. Body language was good. Togetherness was good. We doubled down on our organisation and our resilience. And from whatever that minute was, the 16th minute to the 88th minute where they scored, from 25 yards, another great shot, we were pretty strong and defended really well and kept them at bay. And I think we know we're going to go through some tough moments, tough situations in the season. That was a tough position to be in. And I think the group looked after each other well and came through it. And, that bodes well for the season.
Yeah, start of the season when Liverpool at home, Manchester City away, there's no doubt in how tough that's going to be. And it certainly won't define your season, I'm sure. But for you as a manager, was it crucial to come out of that knowing the players have got belief that they can compete at this level?
Yeah, and I think we've gained that in different ways. Mostly, of course, the Liverpool game in the first, 60 minutes, especially the way we competed, the atmosphere that was created at Portman Road, on and off the pitch, the intensity of our performance. I think that gave the players a lot of belief. Of course, Saturday away to Man City is always a different type of game, but again, going away from home, scoring our first goal, scoring a goal in the transition against the most dominant team in the league bodes well, shows that we can score a goal anywhere. And again, in terms of some of our defensive organisation, once we came through the really difficult 5-minute spell, our organisation was really strong, and that shows and gives the players belief that we can defend really well as a team when we need to. So, there's been difficult challenges in both games, but there's also been lots and lots of moments that give us belief. And there's been lots of individual performances, to be honest. I think when you look at how some of the players have adapted, whether that's, older players, Sammy Morsey's performance at the Etihad on Saturday was I thought, excellent. And then you look at some of the younger players like Omari and Liam and Jacob and boys who are stepping into the Premier League for the first time in their very early 20s, and the way they've adapted to a couple of the toughest games that we're going to have. I think that bodes, really well for the season and for their futures and for the future of the club.
And moving on to tomorrow, have you got latest team news going into that? Is it an opportunity to maybe play some of the younger players, fringe players, some of the new players?
No, we'll utilise the squad for sure. We are in a position where we've made a lot of additions now to the group, and we feel like that's going to really help us over the course of the season, but quite a few of them have been in recent weeks as well. So it's really important that we get the squad up to speed as much as we can, both in terms of match minutes, but also just getting on the pitch together and playing together. So for sure there'll be a lot of changes from Saturday. That's important. We'll try and put out, we'll try and be as organised as we can as a team, but we also know the challenges of lots of new players coming together. But that's going to be our process over this week and over the next few weeks, to be honest. So we'll get started with that on Wednesday and hopefully put out a good performance.
I was going to say, sometimes you can look at the EFL Cup fixtures and maybe it could be a distraction from competing in the league, especially maybe when you're competing with a certain goal in the Premier League. But for you at the moment, this stage of the season, does it give you an opportunity to see these players and give them time on the pitch to integrate with their teammates?
Definitely. We want the games and we want to go through. For the immediate reason of we want another round in the tournament, at least after this, and then beyond that, look, it's a cup competition, and you want to go into every cup believing that you can progress in it and reach the latter stages and maybe go and win it. So we want to progress in the competition, but for now, of course, the priority is getting minutes into the group and bringing this group of players together and moulding them into a team, which we've done over the last couple of years, and now we have to, renew that process with the additions we've made. So, yeah, the game's welcome for us this week, and I think certainly the feeling in the group is that we're getting to a strong position in terms of numbers, and we want to have some extra games in the weeks ahead.
And 2 new additions since Saturday in Dara and Jack. What qualities are you impressed with, and what do you think they can bring to your team? And also, are they available tomorrow?
Yeah, both available, both very different type of players, of course. But both 2 really good additions, we feel, both at good ages with, vast football experience, really. Dara with experience in the Premier League with 2 different clubs and has played a lot of games now for a young age. And Jack with, again, for his age, a lot of different experiences. Had, an early breakthrough, a move to a big Premier League club, has had different loan moves, and, of course, has had a fantastic spell at Sunderland over the last couple of years. So both strengthen us at different areas of the pitch. Dara, for his age, again, will bring a lot of experience and leadership to our back line, and of course is really strong in his duels and his pace as well. And Jack, we know, and everyone has seen him over the last couple of years, he's got some real quality in the final third. He carries the ball well. He's had goals and assists from the left-hand side and gives us some different qualities that we don't have. So 2 really good additions, 2 good characters, and 2 boys with, a good level of a football experience, but also young and hungry to, really establish themselves in the Premier League this year and have big seasons.
Probably know what's probably coming there.
Well, that was Kieran McKenna speaking there. Eddie Howe has also been speaking to the media this morning. We have a few quotes from him. He said, on transfers, at the moment, keeping players this week is a success, as I sit here today. In terms of incomings, that's work still going on behind the scenes. There are a few days left. I think everyone's just trying their best to improve the squad. He was also asked about Kieran Trippier and his future. This is what he's had to say. I think when you look at his performance on Sunday, that was a performance of someone that was focused and ready to help the team. I thought he did in every aspect. All the subs did. Kieran's experience and know-how on the pitch seemed to have a galvanising effect on the group. He also confirmed that Sandro Tonali will be in their squad to face Forest on Wednesday. That is, of course, after serving a ban. He has been out since October. Dave, obviously we've just heard a few quotes there from Eddie Howe, but you don't think he sounded too happy?
Well, I think he's also been directly asked whether he can sign a centre-back and a right winger this week, and his response has been probably not no. So we're going to obviously hear a bit more from Eddie Howe. I just think, we've been reporting, and The Athletic have been reporting about Kieran Trippier's future, and perhaps that he may be looking for a new challenge, and other clubs have been looking at him. And it seemed like, from Eddie Howe's point of view, that was news to him last week. And as far as he was concerned, he wants to keep him and wants to make sure that he stays at the club this week. And as you were just saying there and alluding to, it seems like keeping players this week, Eddie Howe will count as a success. So I think it comes off the back of a kind of changeable summer for Newcastle. They've obviously had changes off the pitch. They've got a new sporting director. Amanda Staveley, who is a big backer of Eddie Howe, has now left the club. They had to sell players before the June 30th deadline, which was difficult, I think, for Eddie Howe to take. And I think, this week he would have hoped for something to come in. I saw Alan Shearer piling a bit of pressure on the club this week, saying, this is a massive week for Paul Mitchell. And I think from Newcastle supporters' point of view, they will be expecting, or they would have at least hoped for, a major signing this week. And if we get to Friday night and it hasn't, I think there will be a little bit of deflation around the place.
It's difficult, go on.
No, I was just going to say, echoing what you mentioned about Alan Shearer as well. I mean, I think his sentiments about the club probably is the general feeling, I think. And that really starts in pre-season. Our colleague Keith Downey going to pre-season with Newcastle, that first interview with Eddie Howe, I think has really set the tone this summer around kind of a few question marks around making sure everyone's kind of on the same page. And I think, Eddie Howe doesn't come out and do an interview like that unless there was something behind the scenes, and maybe not saying it isn't quite right, but clearly he feels a level of discomfort. So it does feel, can they bring in these players? Sandro Tonali will feel like a new player, so that is a positive. but the likes of Kieran Trippier, who's such a leader for this team, his future in doubt, whether they can bring in reinforcements. Mark Gay, of course, we're still looking to see the conclusion to that deal. Just feels like a few question marks that Newcastle don't really need at this point.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right, coming up after the break then, we brought you some of those quotes from Eddie Howe, but we are going to be hearing from the Newcastle manager after the break. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. We brought you some quotes from Eddie Howe a few minutes ago. Well, we can hear from the man himself right now.
Hi, Eddie. Good morning. Final day of Sandro Tonali's 10-month ban from competitive football. So firstly, can you confirm whether he'll be in your squad for Nottingham Forest tomorrow?
Yeah, definitely be in the squad, providing he comes through training today.
And how would you assess his fitness levels as he nears a comeback to playing?
Yeah, he's fit. He just hasn't had the match. The bigger space is the 11v11 that every footballer will tell you is the most important thing, really, the game time. But he's done everything else. He's completed all of training for a long period of time. He's worked incredibly hard with the sports science team to be on top of his fitness and make sure that he's fitter than when he got banned.
How do you think he's feeling?
I'd imagine there's a range of emotions. I mean, probably a lot of excitement, you feel like you're probably the next stage of his career, really. I think when you have a long period of time like he's had out, you have a lot of time to think and analyse and to reflect. I'm sure he's done all of those things, and now it's just he's doing what he loves, which is playing football, and that would be an incredible release for him.
There'll obviously be a lot of attention on him at Nottingham Forest and maybe in the first few weeks after he comes back. How do you ensure, and how important is it that you ensure that he's not affected by any external pressures?
I think it's the same for all the players, to be honest. I think the microscope is on everybody, and it will be on Sandro for a period of time. I think he understands that. We understand that. I think it's small steps. I think for us, we just expect him to be himself and play his game. He's a very intelligent footballer. He's a very good technician. He has to play to his strengths and not try to do anything out of the ordinary, really, and that will be hugely effective for us.
How are you going to work it at Nottingham Forest in terms of using your squad?
Yeah, we'll look at it today. I mean, I think we'll try and play a really strong team. We want to progress. We will make changes as well at the same time, because we have a squad that I think enables me to do so while not weakening the quality. You saw the strength of our bench on Sunday, which made a huge difference. So there's a lot of players that are very eager to show what they can do. So I think it's an ideal opportunity to do that. And
it's a competition that remains hugely important to you as a manager, but also to the club, isn't it?
No, it is, and we're determined to try and do well. I think we've had that focus ever since I've been here to do well or try and do well in every competition. Now, this competition has been good for us. Last year, we were incredibly close to another semi-final, and that was a bit of a low point in our season, really, because we were so close. The season before, of course, we reached the final, so we've got good memories of the competition and we want to do well.
Last thing from me, if things had been different, Elliot Anderson may well have been in your team for this match. He made the move to Forest in the summer. He's played in both their league games. I imagine it'll be good to see him, but I think it's probably been a difficult situation, hasn't it, that move and the manner in which it happened for him? Yeah,
I mean, everything that you've said there is 100% correct. Watching their game in preparation for this was it was good to see Elliot play so well against Southampton. I thought he was excellent. He really contributed to their winning performance in midfield, showed his versatility. I thought he did really well, but it was tinged with sadness for me because we've lost an outstanding, not just player, but person as well from the group. We wish him well, but of course we'll be competing against him in this game.
Thanks, Matthew. If you could just use your microphone, click them on and off for each question. Thank you.
Good morning.
Peter, sorry, can you just click your microphone on, please, for your question?
It's on.
Yeah.
Okay. This one's working.
Yeah.
This one working? Okay. Yeah.
Can't hear you.
Before I talk Newcastle, can I ask you about Sven? Everybody in football seems to be paying tribute to the man this morning. What are your thoughts, please?
Yeah, very sad news. Very saddened. It seemed very sudden. So yeah, thoughts to his family. A great football man. You look back at his career. Wow, what a career he had. Everywhere he went, I think he was loved, and I think that's been an outpouring of emotion upon his passing. But thoughts with his family.
I think he had a great affection for Newcastle, didn't he? I'm sure he visited St James's Park on a number of occasions. He had quite a bond with the club. Yeah,
I'm not necessarily aware of that, but. An unbelievable football man, and I think when you look at the jobs that he had and the pressures that comes with those jobs, and the success he had, it's a career of great memories, I'm sure, for him and his family, and a great time to reflect.
Back to Newcastle, not long to go now before the window closes. Any joy at all in either keeping players, or bring us in?
Well, yeah, at the moment keeping players is a success. As I sit here today. In terms of incomings, no, that work's still going on behind the scenes. A few days left. I think everyone's trying their best to improve the squad, and we'll wait and see what happens with the next few days.
The Mark Gage story doesn't seem to go away. Are you still hopeful, or have you given up on Mark?
I'm not going to comment on individual players.
And Kieran, where are you with Kieran? Because there was a lot of speculation about Kieran wanting away. He seemed to relish coming on at half-time on Sunday. Is that an encouraging sign for you?
Absolutely. I think when you look at his performance on Sunday, that was a performance of someone that was focused and ready to help the team. I thought he did in every aspect. I thought all the substitutes did, enhanced our performance. But it's Kieran's experience and his know-how on the pitch seemed to have a galvanising effect on the group, so I was very pleased with his impact.
More talks with him this week then?
Only football talk.
There'll be just to recap then the breaking news. That was Eddie Howe, but obviously earlier we brought the news that Manchester United have full agreement with PSG for the signing of midfielder Manuel Ugarte. €60 million is the price, including performance-related add-ons as well. He's expected in the UK today to have a medical and will sign off on those personal terms. PSG went into negotiations wanting the €60 million they paid Sporting Lisbon last summer for him before bonuses. The clubs have compromised, giving the willingness from all parties to get a deal done. And Manuel Ugarte has given it like a side eye, the eye emoji on Twitter. But this feels like now it's actually a pretty good window for Manchester United, Dan. They've identified targets, identified positions they wanted, and it feels like Manuel Ugarte is the missing piece now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at Manchester United's window as a whole, it looks like they've reinforced really the spine of the team. You know, you look at Matthias de Ligt, they really needed another centre-back. They've got that. Mazraoui can play in either full-back positions. And Joshua Zirkzee's already made an impression at Old Trafford, getting that winner against Fulham. And I think Ugarte does solve kind of issues, whether that is Casemiro himself or in the gap next to him. He's, of course, we were talking earlier, you know, a combative midfielder who can really help screen that defence and the way Erik ten Hag wants to play. I think it'll be interesting, though. And I think when you look at United's business as a whole, you have to commend the new network that they have at boardroom level, because you mentioned it there, Olivia, in terms of the initial fee they're going to pay. It's £10 million less initially than what PSG wanted in terms of recouping that fee from Sporting Lisbon. And although we've been talking about this deal for a long time, it looks like persistence and perseverance has really helped.
Yeah, I mean, PSG have managed to get two of the best young players in Europe as well this window in Desiree Doué and João Neves. They've managed to recoup a good fee. I think it's one of those fees that both sides will be happy with. I think PSG are happy with it. I think United are happy with it as well, seeing as they've not paid the full asking price. And I think if you're looking at United's window as a whole there, someone that we didn't mention there was Lenny Yoro. Now, I know United had to really push the boat out for Lenny Yoro, but that was simply because A, he's one of the best young centre-backs in Europe, and B, you're trying to beat Real Madrid to that signing, and for all intents and purposes, it seemed like Lenny Yoro was going to Real Madrid. And then there was some form of stardust sprinkled on the situation, and Manchester United managed to get ahead of him. Now, yeah, it's probably Real Madrid didn't quite want to pay that fee, to be honest, but they managed to get the deal done despite Manchester United not being at the level that they were and their stature suggests they should be at.
Yeah. And age-wise, de Ligt's 25, Mazraoui's 26, Zirkzee's 23, and Lenny Yoro's 18 as well. Ugarte's only 23, so those age ranges are very, very good. They're buying young players, some experienced, some not so much, but with the potential to go on and have long careers at United.
I know you said you were impressed with Manchester United's business last summer, but there was a couple of moves that didn't really make sense. All of these transfers this year make sense, and it fits what Manchester United are trying to do in terms of aligning the philosophy from the top of the club to the bottom of the club in terms of the squad. And they brought in players that have got upside, and that's huge for a club like Manchester United. They're finally acting like a big club. Let's see if it pays dividends on the pitch, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, Good Morning Transfers is back at the same time tomorrow. You can see that at 9 a.m. We've got plenty more to come today from the team. Transfer Talk is here at midday. And a full roundup of all the day's news. You can catch the Transfer Show tonight at 5 and 6:30 p.m. Well, coming up, it is the Football Show. Thank you to Kwaku, Dan and Dave. We'll be back a little bit later. And on the Football Show, they'll be joined live by former England and Tottenham defender Michael Dawson. That's to come after the break.